Good day and welcome to our explanation and demonstration of how to set up a lab from scratch in Azure. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up an account in Azure. We are going to set up a domain controller in Azure with DNS. And then we're going to set up a PC, a Windows 10 PC in Azure, and have them all talk to each other. It's not near as complex as you might think, but there are a fair number of steps. So let's get to it. The first thing you need to do is go to portal.office.com. And it's going to ask you to sign in, and I'm going to create a new account because we're going to do this right from scratch. If you've already got a Microsoft account, just use that and skip ahead. So let's go to portal.azure.com. We want the free trial, which gives you $200 to play with. More than enough for an Azure test. Set up a lab. Okay, so a little bit of housekeeping to start with. I really hate the light image. I find it very hard to play with. So I changed it to the dark theme so I can use it. So that's just the cog and down. I don't much care about the quick start center, so I'm just going to get out of this. I'll go to here again, just flip it over. All right, so first time in, click start for the Azure trial. You'll go through and set up your free credit. So normally the first thing you'd need to do in Azure is set up what's called a resource group, which is just a collection of things, virtual machines, virtual networks, web apps, so on and so forth. It's really a way for Microsoft to put all of the stuff you're doing in one place. However, to make this faster, they've set it up so you can build them on the fly. So let's do that. So the first thing we're actually going to build is a virtual machine. Straight to virtual machine. We'll create a new virtual machine down here. And we're going to use our free trial subscription. We need a resource group, as I was just mentioning. Let's click Create New. We'll create one called Test RG1. There we go. And a virtual machine name. I'm going to call the virtual machine Test DC1. And because I'm located in Calgary, I would prefer to use US West 2, which is located in Washington State. Central US is, I think, Wyoming or Chicago, one of the two. They're, the US West 1, well, the one without a number beside it is California, LA in particular. But you can choose whatever's closest to you. Only use the recommended ones. The ones that are down here have limited services. So, okay, so let's go. I don't need infrastructure redundancy, so when Microsoft needs to pull a plug on something, I guess I'm just going to go down. Now, what type of server do I want? I want to choose a Windows Server 2019 data center. A spot instance. This is really, really cool. However, it doesn't work right now because we're in the middle of COVID. I'll take a second to explain it. So spot pricing is similar to what Amazon does. And what it's saying, the idea behind it is that Microsoft has very large data centers and they're not 100% subscribed. So if you can tolerate having your machine taken down at any time at all for any reason by Microsoft, such as a lab, well, then a spot instance is for you. And what it will do is Microsoft will store this in their data center, in whichever data center you've selected, in the unused portion of the data center that people are not subscribing to. So if they've got 90% full, this is a way for them to jam it up. So I'll show you this very quickly. I'll click yes here, and then I will click change size, and you'll see the dramatic price savings here. So 91% savings, 84% savings. These are huge. However, I can tell you right now, after working with Microsoft on this forever, I cannot find a data center anywhere in the world on any service that is taking spot pricing at this minute. So I'll click select here just to get back out. But I'm going to have to choose no on spot pricing, and I'll have to choose an actual size. So I will click here and click change size. Now, having played with this for a few weeks now, I can tell you that trying to run off of one CPU and 1 gig of RAM is cheap, but it's unusable. So you're going to need to at least get to this to make it functional. You just can't live without 2 cores. So what you can do, however, in the future to reduce cost, if you're putting this into production, is to set it up with the higher core count and higher memory, and then drop it down later. But because this is going to be a domain controller, I think we'd agree that 2 CPUs and 4 gig of RAM is pretty small anyway. So let's click on that. And notice that that's an estimated cost. It depends on how much time you actually use. So this is what I'm going to choose. 2 CPUs, 4 cores. Generally, you'd want to choose something with a D before it. D is Microsoft's higher grade. You can find an explanation as to what these different codes mean, but you'll see that 2 CPUs with 4 gig of RAM and a max IOPS of 1280, well, but I can get that down here for 2 gigs and, well, let's go with two CPUs and 8 gig, and it's, you know, more than double the performance. Well, it's not just from the memory, it's because this is a D category. The D is better than the B. Anyway, for what I'm doing, I don't care. I'm just going to select B. So let's go. Now I need to set a username, so I'm going to go with set a password I can remember. Now, inbound port rules. So this is asking, look, do you want just to play with this in a lab inside of Azure, or do you want to be able to remote to this from outside of Azure? So I'm going to show you, we'll leave it on right now as leaving port 3389 turned on, but generally you'll want to turn that off. And I'll explain that in a little bit so you'll understand it. So do I have a Windows Server license? Yes, because I'm a TechNet member, I do already have a license. If you don't, they'll sell you one, so you're on your way. But I'm going to say, yes, I do. They don't validate it, by the way, so let's just move on. I'm going to click. And for a lab, the worst it would do is come up and tell you you've got 30 days to activate. So I don't care for my lab. So let's click next. Now, note when I click next, all I'm doing is rolling through these items at the top. So let's explain a few things. This is the type of disk. Most people for a lab would probably choose standard hard disk. However, if you choose the premium, of course, it's much faster, and you can get benchmarks on that. Microsoft does make them available to show you how much faster. So I'm going to leave it at premium SSD, and let's click next and go to networking. Now in here, you can see it's going to set up a nice new virtual network for me. It's going to give me a nice new subnet of 10.0. It's going to set up a public address for me, which is wonderful. It's asking me about security. It's asking me about load balancing. All of these things are fine, just click next. Now, practically speaking, you could just click review and create. But there is one thing I'd like to change here. So let's go click management, enable auto shutdown. I'm going to do that because I do want it to shut down after 7 p.m. because I don't want to get billed for it. So let's shut it down and let's click next here. So I suppose there are 2 changes I would like to make. One is that management where I'd like it to shut down, which we could change afterwards. All of these things can be changed afterwards, well, virtually all of them. So one of the things that can't be changed, however, is generation 1, generation 2. You want to choose a generation 2 VM if you have the option to do so. We can explain why. I'll put up on the screen here some of the advantages, but it boils down to they're better, they don't cost you anymore, not a penny, so just change off to a VM2. Tags are for billing, for your internal billing system. Most people don't use them, especially for labs, but you certainly can. I can click next, and it will run through a validation. And if I've checked spot pricing, at this point, it would tell me to get lost because there's nothing available, which is annoying that it shows that it's available, but actually isn't. Just frustrating. Okay, so validation passed. There's all the details. I'm going to click create. Now you'll notice at the top here, there's a little bell that tells us what the status is. There we go. And now it's going to show a longer list than you might expect of the various devices virtual devices that it's adding. We're going to speed through this so you don't have to waste your time watching it. Note that you can click on these and bring up details without blowing things up. There's some details. So you'll notice things like, well, status created, isn't that done? No, until it says okay, it's not done. So when I click here, you can see the status is okay. When I click here, the status says created. So no, it's not done. You can see it's still working. Yay, so it's done. That took about 2 minutes to complete. So at this point, I now want to get to it. So I can go to the resource that I just created, but this will get a little confusing. So what I want to do is take you out and take you right back in. So I could just click connect at this point, and I'll get to that. But let me just show you how you get to this from the home page now. So in here, you'll see I've got this recent resources that I've just been working on, and I could go in and look at my various other features, but I can just go straight to virtual machines. It'll take me right back to where I was. There's the DC that I just created, which by the way isn't a DC yet. Right now it's just a server. And what I want to do, you'd think, is click connect. And if I click connect, selecting from RDP, it's going to give me an external address. So I can connect to this machine, this virtual machine that's inside of Azure, that's currently labeled DC1, but it's not actually a domain controller yet. Right now, it's just a server that hasn't even been set up. I connect to it through RDP. So let's do that. Download the RDP file. And all it's doing is putting this together for you. I'll launch it and you'll see. So it says, hey, are you sure you want to be able to connect to this? And all it's going to do is open an RDP session for me using the IP address. You can see right here that Microsoft says is the public address for it. So just go to sign in. Yep. And this is what you're expecting, right? Standard remote desktop stuff. So because we're here, let's configure it a bit. So the very first thing you want to do is patch it, just like a physical box. There we go. It's already got a few patches waiting. That's good. Server Manager, of course, starts automatically. So we'll do some basic configuration while we're here. I'll click Local Server. I've already got the Windows updates running. Real-time protection, sure it's antivirus. I like to bump up the diagnostics, so I always change them to full. Enhanced security makes me crazy. I'm going to turn that off. And the very first product I'm going to install is Credge, which we'll show you in a second, but really not important. I'm going to set my time zone. Now, Internet Explorer is pretty insecure. Chrome is not. Well, it's got its problems, but Credge is really the best thing to go. So Credge is just Microsoft Edge that's running on Chrome. So if you just search for Credge, you'll find it. I'd suggest you download and install it. Certainly not a requirement. If you don't wish to, don't bother. If you're screaming at the screen right now saying, I like Firefox or I like Opera, fine, good for you. Do what you want. But I like this. Okay, so that's running. Let's see what the updates are. You can see this is pretty responsive. Okay, so that is ready to go. Just waiting for this this patch to finish. Okay, while we're waiting, let's show you Task Manager. And you can see in Performance, I can right-click and I can... Okay, well, apparently I can't. We have to wait for this to finish. Actually, I'll just bring this back up. Right-click and I can select Logical Processors, and you can see I've got two. See my memory is being used. Yeah, so it's a pretty decent, it's an acceptable machine. Let's go from there, get started, confirm. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to restart. And while we're doing that, we're going to tighten up the security. So, as I said, right now, using the RDP, that's what people are expecting to do. However, it's super easy to avoid a lot of security risks by doing one of two things, or even doing two of two things here. The first thing to do is go to your networking and find your RDP and click on it and change the source from any IP to your address or your address range. However, I'm not even going to do that. I'm going to get rid of that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up Bastion. So Bastion is, let's see if it tells us when we click on it, if it tells you what it is. Bastion is Microsoft's way of remote desktoping to any machine that's on your subnet. So you can think of it as a jump box. You can think of it as a remote desktop gateway if you're familiar with that. However, you do need, for the very first time, when you set up a new network, you need to set up a new subnet called Azure Bastion subnet. It has to be called that. So it has to start with that anyway. So let's click on that, and then let's go to virtual network at the top here. Setting up Bastion is a very good idea because it gives you security going forward. The idea is that you log in to using a browser to portal.azure.com, go into your network, and then remote from within the browser, with basically from inside of Azure. You're not coming from outside, which makes it much safer. Again, it's worth your while doing, but it has to be set up per subnet. So let's go through it per network. So what we need to do here is click. In address space, you'll see add additional address range. So 10.10.0.0 /24. Why not full range? There we go. Click save. Now I can go down to subnets. I can select add the subnet. I can call it Azure Bastion subnet. You can see it automatically selects the subnet that's not already used. I could put security on it. I'm just going to leave it the way it is. I could also limit it to various endpoints and subnet delegation. As you can see, I'm just going to click OK here. And we'll give it a second to complete. And there it is. Now, that is set up for my entire network for all things I do in the future. Really, really helpful. So let's go back to the start, and I'll just click home here, and now let's go back to virtual machines. There's my virtual machine, and I want to connect to it right here, and I want to connect using Bastion. And it says Bastion's a service that allows it. Yep, use Bastion. It takes us down to Bastion, down here on the left. You can see it's already set up the subnet. It chose it automatically. The IP range is fine. All of this is just great. I'm going to click Create. It's going to use the existing resource group. Okay, that took 9 minutes to create, so it took a little longer than I was expecting, a little bit longer than what I've seen in the past, but that's what it is. So now we can just ignore this. We can go back to the virtual machines. Click on the virtual machine we care about, which is ours. Click Connect. Go to Bastion. And it will say, hey, great, you've got a Bastion connection. Let's set it up. Test admin. And hopefully you'll get a sense of what this does. So pop-up blockers, yes, you need to turn them off. And you can see it's going out to the cloud and it's running RDP through the cloud. Look at that. So now I would be safe to go back to my Azure portal here, and I would be very safe to turn remote desktop off, which I'm going to do. I'm going to go to networking, and I'm going to go to this rule here. I'm going to select delete. There it goes. That rule will disappear from the grid. And now I can only get to this machine using Bastion, which is the way I want it. So let's go here. At this point, I want to run the updates again, just make sure that they cleared. They seem to have, view update history, failed. That's a problem. Okay, that's not tremendously important, just Defender. So let's leave that alone. Now it's time to install the domain controller. So what we do is we click Manage and Add Roles. Next, installation type. Yes, it's role-based. We're going to put it on this server. Yes, we are. There's a couple of quirks here that you need to take note of. we want to add domain services, and it adds a bunch of features. As if you've ever done this on a physical box, you'll know that's just the same. Click yes, that's okay. Next. Don't add anything else you don't need to. Install. Now this doesn't take that long, actually. It seems to run a little faster than it does on-prem. There we go, so that didn't take too long. And let's click close. And up here, it's going to say, hey, you've got to finish it off. Yeah, I need to promote the server to be a domain controller. Of course you do. So, do I want to create a domain controller in an existing domain or existing forest? No, I don't. I want to create a whole new forest. This is all brand new. Now, if I try to set something up here that's just a short name, it's not going to work. I need to set up a fully qualified name. And you'll see here it's suggesting I use corp.uuu.com. So let's do electriccaddy.com is one of my sites. So I'm going to, just for the heck of it, set it up as corp.electriccaddy.com. And yes, I know caddy is not spelled the traditional way. That's the way I like it, so that's what I'm doing. Click next, and it will validate it, and it says it's fine. Now, functional level for the forest and for the domain, the most current you can get is 2016. For most people, you're going to want to leave them at the highest number you can get. Today, that's Windows Server 2016. You have to set a password that meets all of your criteria. So by default in Server 2019, that's uppercase, lowercase, number, and a minimum, I believe, of 8 characters. Now, directory services restore mode is used in the event of a serious crash where you have to restore your Active Directory. So I'm going to set a password. Next. Okay, there's no DNS on here. Right, we know that. Thank you. So, as usual, it will create one. What do you want the NetBIOS of the domain name to be? Sure, corp is fine. Let's click next. Paths is next, and it's going to ask where you want to put the log. There it is, the logs, database, so on and so forth. So a lot of people will tell you to move them to different shares, or not different shares, sorry, different disks. That made a lot more sense back in the day when we had physical disks, especially when they were slow, although it was always questionable, I think. So I just leave them on the C drive, but you can feel free to move them if that's what you want to do. Click next, and this will give us a quick check. It will come up with a number of errors, including telling us that we don't have a static address. We are going to address that in just a moment. So let's scroll down here, and there we go. Click install. So as we're waiting for this, I'm going to go back to portal.azure.com, and we see that the RDP has been removed, which is great. So you can no longer RDP to it from outside. You can only get to it through Bastion, which is way more secure. So the first thing we have to do is set that the IP address that the server has right now to be static, not dynamic, because as you know, that'll blow up DNS and a bunch of other things. So pretty straightforward. Go to the top, type in virtual, and you'll get virtual networks. There we go. Then click on your virtual network. Then click on your DC, and click on IP configuration. And in here, you'll see it set to dynamic. Yeah, it's not what we want. So click on that and change it to static. Now you can set whatever address you want, but if you do change this, you're going to have to reboot your domain controller again. So I'm just going to leave it at 4 and click save. Let's go back and take a look and see how our box is going. Okay, good. It's already going down. That's great. Now let's go back to our virtual networks. We'll click DNS servers. And because it has to get its address from itself, because it's a domain controller and it has DNS, whether you want it to or not, you have to set it as a custom DNS. So it's 10. We just set it to 10.0.0.4 and click OK. There we go. Now what that's done is that will set all future machines that are connected here that we build to point to 10.0.0.4 for their DNS, which is a great thing. Now, let's go take a look. Let's go into Bastion and take a look at how our domain controller is running. And my guess is we won't be able to yet because it's not finished. Let's go to Home, go to Virtual Machines, click on the virtual machine. Now I could click connect and go to Bastion, but it's probably not done. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and let's go through a few things here. The thing you're going to want to see is really this. The first item is just to see, yeah, there's stuff going on here. It goes from the right to the left. But let's take a look at something very useful, which is boot diagnostics. It's a screenshot. And right now there's nothing there because it's right in the middle of its reboot. Normally you'll see the boot up screen, you'll see, things like that. So it's quite sluggish. It does not refresh. You have to refresh it manually. But there we go. But it just came up. So you can see it's coming up, and this will take a while to complete. It is, after all, upgrading itself to a domain controller. So let's take a look at a few other things. Let's go down to serial console. This is kind of handy. And it's as if we'd connected a serial cable to it. There we go. Computer is booting. Isn't that nice? Now I could type in some commands. I'm not going to bother. I could also, oh look, it's finished. That's great. I can also look at the serial log, and it will give me roughly what was in the serial console. And if I click on resource health, I'll get a log of what's going on. So reboot was triggered from inside the virtual machine. We do the machine, blah, 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 blah. That all looks good. So let's go back to boot diagnostics. And I can see that this was this is current as of a few minutes ago. So I'll refresh it. But I found that refresh, yeah, it doesn't. But at least you have an idea what's going on. So now let's go back to our overview. I'll go to connect. I'll go to Bastion. And I will connect. There we go. Now, as you know, it takes a few minutes to finish off after a domain controller has been configured. But one thing we can do while we're waiting here is we can take a look at the DNS. So let's go into here and go to Open Network Settings. Change adapter options. And that gets us into the old school interface. And look what happens when I go into 4 here. Look, so primary DNS is set to itself. And by the way, if you set the IP address in here to be static, your machine, what was it I was reading? It was a great little line that said, bad things will happen and you won't work there anymore. Do not set IP addresses here. You have to set them through the Azure portal, not through the GUI. Okay, so that's kind of handy. Now, let's take a look at the DNS, and we'll look at the forwarders. Now, if you're not familiar with DNS, don't worry about this. We're just waiting for this thing to finish off. But forwarders are where the network sends queries when it can't figure out where something is. So if you type in jjjjj.com, well, your local computer has no idea where that is. So it goes to the DNS server. The DNS server says, I don't have an entry for that. So it goes off to a forwarder. Well, where are the forwarders? Well, take a look. There it is. It set it up as Microsoft. So unable to resolve? Yeah, no, it'll resolve. Look, I can go here on my browser, and I can go to a site that I've never been to before. So let's go to there. Never been there before, and you can see Bing came right up. Things to do in Flagstaff. Okay, there we go. While we're here, I am going to change the default browser because I don't want to even get asked for it anymore. Default apps. Scroll down. There we go. Sometimes it seems to change that over and sometimes it doesn't. Don't worry about these being red right now. They take a minute to clear out. But at this point, we have a domain controller and I can now close this. In fact, I'm done with this. So I'm going to go to Server Manager Properties and I'm going to say, don't show this again and get rid of it. Let's close that. And I'm going to go to Active Directory, Users and Computers. I'm going to pin it to my start. I can go to Sites and Services, pin it to my start. I don't need to do domains and trusts, but you could. Domain. So under Users, I shouldn't have anything yet. Obviously, other than the built-in stuff, tested min, yeah, that's the one I created. Computers, there's nothing there. Domain controllers, guess what's there? One. And it's a global catalog. Isn't that wonderful? So again, if you don't understand this, don't worry about it. You don't really have to. Just trying to show you that this is working. The next thing we need to do now is get a PC up. So let's go back to our, we can just leave this running, it's fine. Let's go back to our portal, and I'm going to go back to home, go to virtual machines, and I'm going to click add in the top left-hand corner, and we're going to add a Windows 10 machine. So let's go to stay on a free trial. We'll select the test resource group that we created earlier. This one we're going to call test PC1. I want it to be, you know, you can put them in different places, but it's a bit nutty. You should put them all in the same place if you can, which in my case is US West 2. Put them all in the same physical location. I'm not worried about redundancy yet. And I'm going to choose Windows 10 Pro 1809. So that's September of 2018. It's ridiculously old. Microsoft's constantly being bothered about this. Fortunately, you can upgrade, and that's exactly what we'll do. So let's get 1809 installed and go from there. Now, Spot instance, again, we can go through that dance, but as we've said before, the Spot stuff just isn't available right now during COVID time. So I'm going to go to change size to keep the price down, and I'm going to sort here by the cost per month, and I'm going to select anything with 2 CPUs, like that one right there. And so that is 4 gig of RAM with the possibility of 4 disks with 2 CPUs. Certainly enough for Windows 10. Click start, select I should say, and then I will choose a username, which I'm going to call user1. Clever name, huh? Set a password. It's got to hit the minimum requirements. So I suggest to do the uppercase, lowercase, and a number, the usual dance. Do I want to do inbound ports and stuff? No, this time I don't. This time I don't want any public ports at all. It just saves me removing it from the firewall. And yes, I have a license, and I'm going to click confirm. Now, I could click review and create because I'm pretty much done, but I want this to be a generation 2 VM. So all of this is fine. Well, you know what? Let's go through it. So I'll go to disks next. And instead of selecting a high-speed disk, I'm going to select a cheap disk. That's the reason you do this, by the way, is to keep costs down. Management, nothing I'm worried about here other than auto shutdown. Yes, I would like to shut it down. So if I forget to power it off, I don't want to be paying for it overnight just to be goofing around. So at 7 p.m., I want it to be powered off. And I can send an email to me. That's wonderful. Under advanced, really, this is the thing I really need to change. Well, I really want to change, which is generation 2 VM. You don't have to. It's just fine if you don't want to. Tags I don't care about. Review and create, it's going to do a quick analysis. And what did it find that was wrong? It found I had done something stupid. So there's a dot on basics, so let's go back to basics and see what I did wrong here. It doesn't like the username. Okay, so let's go with test user1. See if that works. Review and create. Running validation, it passed. Click create. And we'll have a Windows 10 machine. So then all I have to do is bring it up, patch it, connect it to the domain, and I have a lab. I have a domain controller. This is a great way to get started. It's a great way to build yourself a lab and goof with it. And no, you're not going to blow anything up on your real network. And just like when we built the domain controller, you can see it's going through all of these options. I can select operation settings again, and I can see what's going on. Okay, so it's done. Hee-haw. So I can click go to resource, and all it's going to do is, well, let's just click it. It's going to take me over there. But I'll explain again how you can get to it. I just go to home, go to virtual machines, and there's my test PC1. And it's bingo, right back where we are. Now, if I click connect, and now if I try connect via RDP, download RDP file, it's not going to work because I didn't enable external access for this. I only left it to work with Bastion. Let's click OK. Yeah, so I'm going to stop this because it's just going to time out. It isn't going to work. So I have to go to Bastion. I'll type in test user 1, I think is what I use. Test user 1, not test user. Enter my password. And up it comes. Now, this is almost certainly going to take us to the mini setup wizard that you get if you had a new store if you had a new computer from the store. Let's see what it actually does. And there we go. So this is asking for all of the usual things that you'd expect. These are things that are required for GDPR as well. So let's just click through here, location services, advertising, things like that. Yet again, the very first thing I'm going to do is install Credge because I just don't want to use Internet Explorer. Sure, other computers can find this on the network. And let's go to Credge. Let's get the patches going. So I'll click on the Start button, click the Settings, and then go to Updates. There it is. And check for updates. Now, let's take a look at Task Manager just for fun. More settings, more details, I should say. Go to Performance. And logical processors. There we go. We've got 2 CPUs. And we're on our way. So let's click close it. Let's get rid of the Task Manager as it's just adding overhead. It's not necessary. We don't need to have... there we go. The browser's already closed. And you can see here it's got updates going. Now, the other thing I want to do is I want to join this to the domain. So I'm going to right-click. I'm going to click Home here. I'm going to click System. Click System Info from About. There it is. Then I want to join it to the domain, so I'll go to, well, really any of these is fine, but let's go to, I'll go to Remote to start with. And I'll click the first, it just brings up the old school settings. There we go. Go to computer name here. And I will join it to the domain. Credge, sign in, continue without signing in, and we'll just close it to get rid of it. There we go. So in here, I'll type in corp.electric.caddy.com, and it should prompt me for credentials, for domain credentials, and it does. Isn't that nice? Test admin. Isn't that nice? So now that's joined to the domain. Click OK, click Close. I'll restart later. I'm going to close this window. Let's go back to Home. Go back to Update and see what the patches are. Oh, still working away. Okay, so let's go back to the domain controller while we're waiting for these patches to finish. And let's see in computers if there's something here. Oh, I don't see anything. Well, what if I press F5? There we go. If I press F5 to refresh, there it is. So if I get out of here and I go back to Active Directory, there it is. There's my computer. So let's create a user. So just like usual, new user. And there's a lot of ways to do this, but there it is. Let's use test user 1. I'll cleverly call their login test user 1, not case sensitive, by the way. And next, and set a password for them that meets the domain minimums. And actually, I don't want the user to change the password just because it's a pain. There we go. And that is just a standard user. It doesn't belong to anything, just domain users. Okay, let's take a look at if there are updates for this, because there almost certainly are for the domain controller. Let's do check for updates. So we'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. There we go. Cumulative update. Yep, there we go. And a .NET update, of course. So we'll let those run. And we'll let this finish off, and I'm going to speed this up so you don't have to sit and wait. Then we'll reboot. Okay, if it restart on the PC, let's see where it is. So I'll click PC. Now there's no real way to tell, right? Wrong, remember? Boot diagnostics. I can click in here. I can get a screenshot of what's there. So look, it's doing the updates. So getting Windows ready. And refresh. Now, as I said before, this refresh does a pretty poor job of actually getting a new snip, but at least it's something. So it'll be a minute or two to reboot. Let's take a quick look at the domain controller. 74%, it's going to be a bit yet. So, and it's good. You certainly don't want to be rebooting both of these at the same time, because that machine, that PC, is trying to join the domain. If the domain's down, well, that's not particularly useful. So I'll go back to Overview and Connect. By the way, I could just go to Connect on the side here, but I'll just go this way because I'm used to doing it that way. And I'm going to sign in with that test user account that you'll recall we created in Active Directory. So let's take a look at that. Yeah, test user 1, not case sensitive. Usernames are never case sensitive in Windows. So let's go back here and try to sign in with test user 1. test user 1. Passwords are always case sensitive. I'm not sure if I typed that right. Yep, I did. So this is going to have to build a new profile. This will take a second. But this is signing into the domain, which is exciting stuff. There we go. So let's go to the domain and see what we can see. Test DC1 sysvol. There it is. That's your Active Directory, ladies and gentlemen. Now, let's upgrade this because I'm all but certain when I click Settings here and I go to Updates again, it's going to have the Windows. There it is, download and install. So I'll download and install 1909. We'll close that because it's not required. And let's take a look at the domain controller, see if it's ready. Oh, yes, it is. Yes, that's great. So now I'll just recycle that or cycle that. And yet again, I can go back to the portal.azure.com and I can click on the DC and I can go to see what's going on. I can go down to boot diagnostics and let's just take a little look. And I'm going to click refresh because that is a while ago. No, it's not. That's just a few minutes ago because it's UTC. So we gotta wait. In other words, this is still on the lock screen. So domain controllers aren't exactly known for being fast on the reboots. This is going to take a few minutes, but that's okay because so is this PC install. This Windows 10 upgrade is going to take a minute as well. All right, so I'm going to stop this, and again, I'll restart it in probably 5 or 10 minutes when those patches are done. So that Windows 10 patch took so long that the server, the domain controller, stopped. So let's go to start it back up, deallocated. Deallocated means not only is the machine stopped, but you're not paying for it anymore. So that's what deallocated is. Let's fire this thing up and see what happens. We could check up here for the status. And it's starting, it says, and let's go take a look at the boot diagnostics. Refresh here, see what that comes up with. And nothing this second, so, which is not tremendously unusual. It does seem to take a while for these images to be updated. Well, they're just refreshed to a nice black screen. Let's go up and take a look at to see what's going on. Let's look at the activity log. So 2 minutes ago, click on that, and we're just waiting for the machine to start. Okay, well, I knew that already. I'll bring you back when the machine is up. So while we're waiting for that, let's flip over to test user 1. There, the machine just came back up. Well, let's rephrase that. The machine was up, the PC was up. What was down was the domain controller, and that includes DNS. So what I was going to do was right-click on this and go to network and see what's going on, and I was expecting for it to not have DNS. I'm very sure that is what the case was, but anyway, it's now up. So that means that the domain controller is probably up, and DNS is certainly up. So let's go see if we can get into it. Let's refresh this first, see if it says anything. It does. It's now got succeeded, so that's happy. So let's go back to overview and connect. We'll connect with Bastion. And there it is. The domain controller is up. I noticed a bang down here a moment ago. That seems to have cleared up. So its own DNS. And I expect all will be well. There it is. Okay, so let's run through the balance of things that you need to know before we wrap this up. And I go to virtual machines, or we can just go straight to it. So for this one, let's just go straight to the PC. We'll say we'll click on that. Now, let's roll through a few things, including resizing. So now that we have the boxes up and running and patched, and if you're just running a lab to goof around with it, well, maybe you don't need to spend as much money on this thing, so you can decrease it. And you can decrease it by going into size. So let's look at size, and you can say, yeah, I don't think I need that now. I'm going to jump it down to, I'm going to cut the price in quarter from $40 to $10. I'll change it to that one. Selecting resize, as it shows here, will cause the device to restart. So your Windows, that machine's going to go down and come back up. And of course, because it has far fewer resources, you can see here it's got about a quarter of the resources, maximum IOPS, 320 versus 1280, that it is going to probably take a minute to go down and come back. So let's keep moving through other things. Let's go to extensions. This is kind of interesting. So there are a number of plugins that you can get that you don't have to install manually. You can just jam them right in straight from the Azure system. So click Add here. The one I like to use is the Sentinel-1 security plugin, because I use that in with lots of my clients. But you can see there are other ones as well. And you click this and it will just install. The things that are interesting are things like auto shutdown. Now that Windows 10 upgrade took so long, I had to change this. So you can see that there's a nice easy time for me to change. And I could set a notification if I wanted. I don't want at this point. Run command is kind of neat. This will do just what it says. Like, you can run a command on the machine. So let's run an ipconfig. Now I cut that out because that took a couple of minutes, which was longer than I would like, but I do want to just show you, there's the script, ipconfig all, and there's your information. Resource health, we've shown you this earlier, but you get an idea what's going on. It's being resized, just a log really, right? Nothing too interesting. Reset password I've used a few times. I create these virtual machines and I try to run different passwords and things, and it's quite easy to get confused as to which one's which because I'm doing these in a hurry. Yeah, this will just force an account for the administrator accounts, which is great. Really handy if you have forgotten something. And that's about it for that stuff. Back up at the top though, there is something that's useful, which is the access control. So this is the new way Microsoft wants you to manage things. We're not going to spend time on it here other than to say this is where it is. You can assign different roles to different people, just like you can in Active Directory, and give them access. Now, one of the things I did want to go over, probably the last thing we'll go over before we wrap this up, is that you have noticed that you don't have to install a DHCP server on your domain controller, which is a bit odd for those of us that are used to being on-prem, or even, well, on-prem for sure, but even in the virtual world, we still install DHCP servers. And the reason for that, of course, is because we have networking handled by Azure itself. So you can go into networking and you can set your own firewall rules. Here, this is on this particular machine, but you can also go back to home, go to virtual networks, click on your virtual network, and see your devices here, right? See the IP addresses? So this one, the 10.0.0.4, the DC, that is a static address. Again, we've clicked on it, gone into it, but let's click on this one, the PC, and we'll see that it is in fact a dynamic. Right, dynamic. Okay, nothing too interesting there, but you need to be aware of that if you're trying to build a lab. About the only thing that I've been really surprised at with this so far is, well, there's two things. One, you do not change IP information inside of the VMs. You just don't do it. You change it here. And the second thing is, I would expect that by now, when I'm joining a machine to a domain or when I'm installing a new machine, just the initial setup wizard in Azure would prompt me to say, do you want to just put this right into a domain? But it doesn't. You still have to go through, add the machine, start it up, patch it, then connect it to the domain, then reboot and go through the whole dance just as if it was physical, which is a bit odd for me. The last thing I will say is I do find it very odd that these machines are not better patched right out of the box. And I was giving that some thought as to why that could be, and I've done a little bit of reading on it. And I think it's because Microsoft is trying to simulate what's out in the real world. So when you're running your labs, if you need to test a machine that is 1803, we'll say, and without any patches on it, well, how do you do that? Well, now you can. You could do it this way. So there's a logic to that, I suppose. But anyway, that's it. If you have any questions or concerns, please get a hold of us at www.urtech.ca. We'll be very happy to help. Thank you. Bye-bye.